Thank you, Senator McGrath, for that important contribution to the Australian Senate. Senator Lyons.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I rise tonight to speak about the federal electorate of Canning. And as a young mother, I lived in the federal seat of Canning for around 12 years. My children went to primary schools in the electorate. We used the public hospital and the other services. I completed my secondary schooling in this electorate and indeed completed mature-age university entrance at Kelmscott Senior High School. My father, at 93, still lives in the electorate and is active in his community of Mandurah. It's an area I know well, and it's an area well and truly let down by the Abbott government. It's an electorate which showcases Abbott's broken promises and cruel budget cuts. It's an electorate which has been deserted by the Abbott government. Let's start with unemployment. For a government that goes on and on about jobs, they've forgotten the federal electorate of Canning, particularly the Mandurah precinct. When Labor was in government, unemployment in Mandurah was just 4%, and we'd moved that figure down from around 6% to 4%. Under the Abbott government, it's a whopping and disgraceful 8.6%, 8.6%, well above the national average. And with youth unemployment at an all-time high, particularly again in the Mandurah precinct, where it's 14.6%, coupled with an adult unemployment rate of 8.6%. Imagine the Abbott government's unemployment waiting period playing out in the Mandurah precinct. Shows how out of touch they are when the Abbott government ministers and backbenchers and senators have said to the young unemployed, "You'll be okay. Fall back on your family. Families will help." Well, I'd suggest that at 8.6% adult unemployment in Mandurah, that statement will be very hard for young unemployed people in the precinct of Mandurah. And what of the Abbott government's job plan? It's all about punishing and blaming young people. Who could forget those comments when they were looking at forcing young people, in fact anyone under the age of 30, onto no benefits for 6 months? And those cruel comments we heard about, well, it was all about people just lying on couches playing Xboxes. Again, it shows how out of touch they are. And it's not that people in Mandurah don't want work. They're desperate for work, because under Labor, unemployment in the Mandurah precinct was 4%. But through the Abbott government's neglect and their no jobs plan and their no care attitude, it's now disgracefully crept up to 8.6%. So the Abbott government has done nothing and knows nothing about job creation. And what about seniors? Well, again, this is a showcase of the Abbott government's cruel budget cuts. The federal electorate of Canning has double the average number of seniors living in the electorate. I'm sure they know how the Abbott government has made their lives much harder. People who through their working lives have well and truly paid their way. And how have they been rewarded by the Abbott government? Well, they haven't been rewarded at all. Quite the opposite. Again, they've been told to suck it up, buckle up, you're in for a tough ride. The Abbott government wants to increase the retirement age to 70. It wants to reduce pensions. And together with the Barnett government, who sits on a projected deficit into the billions, they've abolished the pensioner discounts. Discounts that people in the federal electorate of Canning relied upon and was surely entitled to after a long working life. Discounts on vehicle licensing, council charges, water rates and emergency services levy. And despite under the state Labor governments, the electorate of Canning being well serviced by public transport, Pensioners still rely on their cars, although there was that classic comment from Treasurer Mr Hockey when he said poor people don't drive cars, and he was forced to correct that, and he finally said, well, if they do drive cars, they don't drive them very far. Again, completely out of touch. And again, in the federal electorate of Canning, twice the average number of pensioners, and yet we see the worst of the Abbott government's budget cuts being played out in that federal seat. And what about the indexation cuts the Abbott government wants to put in place on pensions, which is likely to leave pensioners, according to ACOS, about $80 a week worse off into the future? I mean, you just can't keep cutting people's pay, whether it's penalty rates, whether it's indexation. That takes money out of the economy, it forces people to reduce their costs, and it puts them further and further towards the poverty line, and in the case of pensioners, under the poverty line. And according to the Parliamentary Budget Office, changes to indexation of the age pension will result in $23 billion less being paid to pensioners if this cut goes ahead by 2024. $23 billion being taken away from pensioners who've spent their life paying their taxes, looking after their families, doing the right thing, and yet in their retirement, all the Abbott government wants to do to the pensioners in Canning is continue to punish them. And of course, if Mr Abbott gets his way and increases the pension age to 70, Australia will have the highest pension age in the world. The highest in the world. That's the future for pensioners in the electorate of Canning if they continue with the Abbott government as their government. And of course, let's not forget, at the same time as wanting to cut pensions, increasing the retirement age, Mr Abbott has imposed a new tax on going to the GP. A new tax on going to the GP. And people in the federal electorate of Canning do rely, in some cases, on bulk billing, and where they have to pay above that levy, it comes out of their pockets. And the Abbott government wants to take more out of their pockets by that sneaky tax it put on to visits to the GP. And let's look at Labor's record in the electorate of Canning. We created the NBN. Mandurah has a very fast and efficient NBN. It also has a digital hub, which provides a gateway for local people, young and old, to improve their online skills at no cost, and gives them the skills to access the national broadband network in their home. And I have to say, when we were in government, I was very proud to go down and be part of one of the people invited to the opening of that hub. And I have to say that the City of Mandurah, the Mayor and all of the users who came to the opening were really proud, very proud. And they set their hub up in their library because their library is well utilised. It's a fantastic space, and they were very, very proud of their digital hub. They showed me that. They had children accessing it, senior sits, and it was well received and no doubt is well used in the precinct of Mandurah. And of course, you can get training for any level. You can do your online job applications. You can Skype, all sorts of activities for children in that Mandurah hub. The other thing that I was proud to be part of in Mandurah was opening the National Rental Affordability Scheme that operates near the part of that funding was used to create a hub near the Mandurah train station that will be a combination of high-density living, low-density housing, affordable housing, all sorts of housing to create a real community around that train station. Again, an initiative of the Labor government, and where's that gone? Completely scrapped, completely scrapped. Lots of other things happened in the electorate of Canning when Labor was in government, and I'll take my time over the next couple of weeks to inform the Senate about those. But the housing that's being built at the Mandurah train station, again, like the digital hub, is something I'm very proud of, to be able to say that was a Labor initiative, well received by the private developers, the council and the people who were occupying some of those new homes. The City of Canning, the federal electorate of Canning, deserves a lot better. Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President.